Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something literally all of us have felt at one point or another, the very profound human need for a confidant. Have you ever felt so stuck or just so overwhelmed that you needed to vent to a complete stranger? Well, you are definitely not alone. We're going to trace this incredible journey from ancient clay tablets all the way to modern AI chatbots to see exactly how the role of the safe stranger has evolved over time. Okay, let's kick things off with this powerful observation from a 1972 BBC documentary. They said, "When we are most in need of support, we find ourselves most isolated." Man, that really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly sets the emotional stakes for us today. Think about it. When things get really difficult, our fear of being judged often makes us withdraw from the very people closest to us. Which brings us to Section 1, the safe stranger and the tragic cycle of secrecy. To understand this dynamic, we have to look back at the reality of 1970s advice columns. 500,000. That is the staggering number of letters received every single year by British advice columnists like Marjorie Bropes in 1972. And look, these weren't jokes or pranks. They were a critical lifeline for ordinary people dealing with deep isolation, genuine anxiety, and just profound ignorance about taboo topics. The sheer volume of these letters is a pretty sobering comment on the state of society at the time. So why write to a stranger? Well, the documentary argued that a societal fear of moral judgment essentially forces people to turn to anonymous folks in the media for empathy. People were absolutely terrified of being ostracized for their struggles, so they kept their deepest anxieties completely silent. And this creates a tragic cycle of secrecy, right? We become entirely disconnected from our immediate support systems simply because we're terrified of a harsh moralistic lecture. How often have you kept a worry from a partner or a friend just to avoid being judged? Moving on to Section 2. The unchanging human core. Because as you'll see, this is definitely not just a 1970s problem. If we look at the historical record, it's wild how stable the content of human distress actually is. We have a clay tablet from 1750 BCE in Mesopotamia complaining about a neighbor's goat. Yes, literally, ancient humans had terrible neighbors too. Fast forward to 100 CE, you've got a Roman father stressing over his son's pride. In 1270, a medieval woman writing about feeling spiritually dry. A 1950s American housewife feeling a total loss of identity. The emotional grammar here, the need for safety, the desire to belong, and that paralyzing fear of judgment is entirely unchanged. And that reveals the core paradox we're unpacking in this explainer. What hasn't changed is our inner trouble, but what has completely transformed is the societal infrastructure that manages it. See, for most of human history, a single institution, maybe your religion or the village elder, handled your survival anxiety, your search for meaning, and your sense of belonging all at once. Today, our suffering is privatized. Meaning management is fragmented across therapists, doctors, financial planners, and the scale of what we worry about has expanded from local winter survival to massive, global systemic threats. Those load-bearing structures that used to absorb our troubles are now stretched incredibly thin. That takes us to Section 3, the changing shape of ignorance. Because the scale of our worries has expanded so much, we have to examine how the very architecture of our beliefs has transformed. Here is the crucial point. We didn't just add more information over time, we changed how belief actually works. Back in pre-literate times, ignorance was bounded. What you didn't know, your neighbor probably didn't know either. Then, the printing press democratized knowledge, but it kept gatekeepers around because printing was expensive. Broadcast TV and radio gave us a centralized, clean signal. But then the internet came along and entirely removed the friction. It collapsed the filtering of bad ideas and swapped out optimizing for truth with optimizing for emotional engagement. And this collapsed filtering produces some very specific, very modern afflictions. We are now dealing with confidence without foundation. People holding incredibly strong opinions on specialized topics based entirely on social media. We have misinformation that is unfalsifiable by design. The sheer volume of noise is literally polluting our information commons, making the truth really expensive to find. Ultimately, this creates what we call epistemic learned helplessness. That's a fancy way of saying we just throw our hands up and stop trying to figure out what's true at all. We've built a weaponized ignorance amplifier that gives us chronic moral exposure, but completely strips away our agency to fix it. Let's look at Section 4. Advice beyond the West, because it's absolutely crucial we step outside our usual framework to see how other cultures handle this need for counsel. Check out this perspective from an uncle in Ming, China, around 1605 CE. The advice he's giving isn't follow your heart or speak your truth, it's Do not ask what will make me fulfilled. Ask what will keep the 5 relationships in harmony. In this tradition, seeking counsel had nothing to do with authentic self-expression or getting private psychological relief. It was entirely about discovering how to fit yourself properly into the social and familial structure to keep the peace. Or consider this really beautiful, modern indigenous perspective from a Coast Salish elder. They say, "We do not fix heaviness by solving it alone." Healing here is reconnecting with land, language, and practice. In many indigenous traditions, knowledge is collective. It's not confessional. You don't write a secret letter to a stranger. You sit in a circle and you are witnessed by your people. The elder isn't there to give you a 5-step life hack to optimize your individual outcome. They're there to return you to the community's values. Now, what's truly fascinating about comparing these models is the realization that this whole safe stranger concept, it's largely a byproduct of disrupted communal bonds. It is not a universal human truth. The Western model of private individual relief really only thrives in societies where industrialization, mobility, or colonization have fractured dense communities. For a lot of people historically, relying on a stranger was actually an imposition that replaced the local elders and collective circles they used to rely on. But even within Western society, advice looked very different if you were on the margins. Take the 1938 Dear Deirdre column for Nisi Japanese Americans. This columnist wasn't just, solving marital boredom. She was literally teaching her readers how to navigate the social conventions of a prejudiced white world, all while still honoring the super strict standards of their own parents. This type of counsel required complex code switching. The advice columnist was performing vital care work, helping readers survive prejudice without losing their heritage. Section 5. AI as the new advisor. Let's bring this right up to the present day and see how technology is stepping into this ancient role. So today, platforms like ChatGPT and Gemini act as the ultimate ersatz village elders. AI fulfills the exact structural role of the old advice columnist. It's an infinitely scalable, safe stranger. But there is a catch. Have you ever vented to a chatbot instead of a friend? When you process your feelings with an AI, sure, you relieve the immediate pressure, but you completely avoid the social friction and vulnerability actually required to confront a partner or build real human intimacy. If those 1970s columnists we talked about earlier were here to evaluate AI, they'd probably be pretty torn. Someone like Claire Rayner would absolutely love the scale. She loved that it can provide instant, non-judgmental medical facts to people who are paralyzed by stigma. But they would be terrified of its inability to read between the lines. A machine can give you technically correct facts, but it completely lacks lived empathy, the human touch, and those crucial situational ethics needed to spot silent desperation. And that brings us to a massive modern crisis: responsibility drift. In the old days, your community, your family, your spiritual leaders, they all shared the burden of your survival and your meaning. Today, that responsibility is totally diffused. Your therapist handles your feelings, your doctor handles your body, the state handles the systems, and you are left completely alone to handle the meaning. We're individually responsible for integrating a life that literally no single institution actually understands anymore. Finally, Section 6, the ultimate question. We've reached the culmination of our journey from ancient clay tablets to algorithmic chatbots. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. Do we actually need advice to fix our lives, or do we just need permission to see our reality clearly? As we face this incredibly overwhelming information environment, maybe the true value of any advisor, whether it's a human being or a machine, isn't offering a neat little solution. Maybe it's simply revealing the structures and the silences that we're just too afraid to name ourselves. Definitely something to think about the next time you ask a screen for the answers. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you next time.